Ethan Corleone. Ethan Corleone.
The sword Grandmaster everyone feared had one forbidden weakness: was a story about power, regret, loyalty, and the dangerous cost of burying one's humanity beneath fear. On the coldest night of winter, the city of Ravello looked like a kingdom carved from silver and smoke. Rainwater rolled down dark stone buildings while distant church bells echoed through the narrow streets. Deep inside an underground arena hidden beneath an abandoned train station, men twice their opponent's size trembled as they stepped away from the center ring. Ethan Corleone stood alone under the dim yellow lights. The crowd whispered his name with the same fear people reserved for storms and war. The sword Grandmaster. He wore a long black coat soaked by rain, his dark hair brushed back carelessly, his sharp jaw marked by an old scar running beneath his left eye. His calm expression unsettled people more than violence ever could. Men who had seen him fight claimed he moved like silence itself. Yet tonight, something inside him felt strangely heavy. The final challenger collapsed to the floor after a single move from Ethan's blade. The arena exploded with cheers, but Ethan barely reacted. He simply lowered the sword and stared at the blood dripping from the silver edge. Years ago, victory used to satisfy him. Now it only reminded him how empty he had become. A wealthy businessman approached him nervously with a suitcase full of cash. "You remain undefeated," the man said carefully. Ethan closed the blade and handed it to his assistant. "Everyone loses eventually," he replied quietly. The businessman forced a laugh, but Ethan's eyes never changed. As he walked toward the exit tunnel, the roaring crowd slowly faded behind him. Cold wind struck his face outside. Snow drifted through the dark streets. Then his phone vibrated. Only 3 people in the world possessed that private number. Ethan answered immediately. Static filled the line. Then came the trembling voice of an older man. "Ethan, she's alive." Ethan froze. For the first time in years, fear entered his eyes. The voice continued. "Elena Ripley survived." The call ended. Ethan stood motionless beneath the falling snow while old memories crashed into him like broken glass. A woman laughing beside a lake. A pair of trembling hands covered in blood. A betrayal. A promise he failed to keep. The strongest swordsman in the world suddenly looked like a man haunted by ghosts. And somewhere far away, Elena Ripley opened her eyes in a dark hospital room while armed men waited outside her door. Before the story continued, Ethan's world seemed to pause for one brief moment. And to everyone listening to this story tonight, welcome. Where are you watching from? How are you doing today? If you enjoy emotional adventure stories filled with suspense, love, betrayal, and unforgettable victories, this is the perfect place for you. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, this is the best moment to do it so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Because Ethan Corleone's greatest battle was not against an enemy. It was against the one weakness he spent his entire life trying to bury. The next morning, Ethan returned to his estate overlooking the cliffs beyond Ravello. The mansion was enormous but lifeless, filled with expensive furniture no one used and long hallways haunted by silence. His closest companion, Adrian Skywalker, waited beside the fireplace. Adrian had fought beside Ethan for over 10 years. Unlike Ethan, Adrian smiled easily, joked often, and treated every servant in the house with kindness. "You look terrible," Adrian said. "I always look terrible." "No. Tonight looks different." Ethan poured himself a drink but never touched it. "She's alive." Adrian's expression changed instantly. "Elena?" Ethan nodded. For several seconds neither man spoke. Years earlier, Elena Ripley had vanished after a brutal attack that left dozens dead and Ethan falsely blamed for the massacre. Everyone believed she died in the fire that destroyed the harbor district. Everyone except Ethan. Deep down, he never stopped searching. Elena had once been a medical volunteer working in conflict zones. Unlike everyone else, she never cared about Ethan's reputation or feared his violence. She saw the exhausted man hiding beneath the legend. And Ethan loved her enough to push her away. Because loving him meant danger. What if it's a trap? Adrian asked carefully. It probably is. Then don't go. Ethan finally looked at him. If she's alive, I already left too many times. Across the sea in the city of Valmera, Elena sat near the hospital window staring at the ocean. Her shoulder remained wrapped in bandages from a recent attack. A younger nurse named Sophia Creed entered the room carrying tea. You should rest, Sophia said gently. Elena smiled faintly. I've been resting for years. But Elena was not truly resting. She was hiding. After surviving the harbor fire years ago, Elena discovered powerful businessmen had orchestrated the massacre to control illegal weapons routes across multiple countries. Ethan had unknowingly become their perfect scapegoat. Instead of exposing the truth immediately, Elena disappeared after learning those same people planned to kill Ethan next. So she sacrificed her old life to protect him. Even if he never knew. But recently, someone discovered she was alive. And now people were dying again. That evening, Elena received a package with no return address. Inside sat a silver necklace Ethan once gave her. Attached to it was a note. He never stopped looking for you. Tears filled Elena's eyes. At the same time, Ethan prepared for the journey that would drag him back into the darkest parts of his past. Before leaving Ravello, he visited the grave of his younger brother, Daniel Kent. Daniel had died years ago protecting Ethan during one of the bloody conflicts that built Ethan's feared reputation. Ethan stood silently before the grave while snow gathered on his shoulders. You always said revenge would destroy me, Ethan murmured. Wind moved through the cemetery trees. For the first time in years, Ethan was no longer chasing enemies. He was chasing hope. But hope could be far more dangerous. The train ride to Valmera lasted through the night. Ethan spent most of it staring through the window while memories tormented him. He remembered Elena teaching children in refugee camps. He remembered her laughing at his inability to dance. He remembered the last night he saw her. She had begged him to walk away from violence. Instead, Ethan chose war. And by morning, her world burned. Ethan finally arrived in Valmera. He sensed trouble immediately. Men watched him from rooftops. Cars followed him through crowded streets. Someone expected him. Inside a small cafe near the harbor, Ethan met an information broker named Victor Bourne. Victor was nervous from the moment Ethan entered. You shouldn't have come here, Victor whispered. Where is Elena? Victor slid a photograph across the table. It showed Elena entering a private clinic outside the city. She's being hunted by a man named Lucien Salazar. Ethan's eyes darkened. Lucien Salazar. A former student. Years ago, Ethan trained Lucien personally, believing the young man possessed discipline and honor. Instead, Lucien became consumed by ambition. Now he controlled criminal networks stretching across multiple countries. He wants your empire, Victor continued. But more importantly, he wants her. Ethan stood immediately. Where is Lucien? Victor hesitated. He controls half the city now. Politicians protect him. Businessmen fear him. And he's been waiting years for a chance to destroy you publicly. Ethan turned toward the door. Then Victor spoke again. There's something else. Ethan stopped. Victor swallowed hard. The harbor massacre years ago. Lucien helped organize it. Silence filled the cafe. Ethan slowly looked back. His own student. The boy he trained like family. For years Ethan believed powerful strangers destroyed his life. Now he realized betrayal had been standing beside him all along. Outside, rain began falling violently across the harbor. And somewhere in the city, Lucien Salazar smiled while watching security footage of Ethan's arrival. The Grandmaster finally came home, Lucien said. Beside him stood armed guards and wealthy investors. One of them asked nervously, "Should we eliminate him immediately?" Lucien shook his head. "No. Fear only matters when people witness it." He lifted a glass calmly. "I want Ethan Corleone broken in front of the entire world." That night, Ethan infiltrated the private clinic. The hallways smelled of antiseptic and rainwater. Nurses moved quickly between rooms while thunder shook the windows. Ethan silently disarmed 2 guards outside Elena's room. Then he opened the door. Elena turned toward him. Time stopped. She looked older, wiser, stronger. But her eyes remained exactly the same. Ethan suddenly forgot every speech he imagined during the past 7 years. "Elena." She stared at him for several seconds. Then quietly said the words he feared most. "You shouldn't have come." Before Ethan could answer, gunfire erupted downstairs. Lucien's men had arrived. Ethan immediately drew his blade while Elena grabbed medical supplies. "You can still escape through the west stairwell," she said. "I'm not leaving you again." Another explosion shook the building. The lights flickered. For one brief second Elena looked directly into Ethan's eyes and saw something she had not seen there in years. Regret. Real regret. They escaped through the collapsing rear corridor while bullets shattered glass behind them. Outside, heavy rain drenched the streets. Ethan fought through attackers with terrifying precision while protecting Elena beside him. But during the chaos, Elena saw Ethan hesitate. One of the attackers was barely older than a teenager. Years ago Ethan would have struck instantly. Now he lowered the sword. That hesitation nearly got him killed. Elena pulled him away just before gunfire tore through the wall beside him. They escaped into the crowded night. And for the first time, Elena realized the feared Grandmaster was changing. The next several days forced Ethan and Elena together once again. They hid inside abandoned safe houses, traveled through mountain villages, and avoided Lucien's expanding network. At first their conversations remained tense. "You disappeared without a word," Ethan said one night beside a small fire. Elena looked away. "You chose violence over us. I thought protecting you meant leaving." "No. Protecting someone means staying when things become difficult." Her words struck deeper than any blade. Gradually, old feelings resurfaced. Elena noticed Ethan helping injured villagers without revealing his identity. Ethan watched Elena comfort frightened children even after everything she endured. They began remembering who they once were before pain changed them. One evening during a storm, they sheltered inside a remote church. Candles flickered softly while rain pounded the roof. Elena finally asked the question buried in her heart. "Why did you really become the Grandmaster?" Ethan remained silent for a long moment. Then he answered honestly. "Because fear was the only thing stronger men respected when I was young." He slowly sat beside her. "When my father died, powerful people destroyed my family piece by piece. I thought becoming stronger would stop the pain. Did it?" Ethan looked at his scarred hands. "No. It only made everyone afraid to come close enough to hurt me." Elena's eyes softened. For years Ethan hid behind strength. Now he finally sounded human. That night they shared their first embrace in years. Not passionate. Not dramatic. Just 2 exhausted souls finally allowing themselves to stop pretending. But hope never survives quietly. The next morning Adrian arrived unexpectedly. Ethan was shocked. "How did you find us?" Adrian smiled. "You trained me too well." For a brief moment, everything felt safe again. Then Ethan noticed blood on Adrian's sleeve. "Who followed you?" Adrian's silence answered the question. Within minutes, armed vehicles surrounded the church. Lucien himself stepped from the lead car. Elegant black suit. Cold smile. Eyes filled with envy. "You always inspired loyalty," Lucien called out. "Even now." Ethan stared at Adrian. Betrayal settled heavily in the room. Adrian looked devastated. "I didn't have a choice." Lucien laughed softly. "Everyone has a choice." The battle that followed shattered the church interior. Candles crashed. Wood splintered. Gunfire echoed through stained glass halls. Ethan fought through Lucien's men while Elena protected injured villagers hiding underground. But during the chaos, Lucien revealed the truth. Years ago, he manipulated Ethan into accepting contracts that secretly funded illegal arms trades. The harbor massacre happened after Elena discovered evidence exposing the operation. Lucien orchestrated everything, including Daniel Kent's death. Ethan nearly lost control. Rage consumed him so violently that even Lucien stepped back. For years Ethan blamed himself for every tragedy. Now he realized someone had carefully shaped his suffering. Lucien smiled cruelly. "You built your reputation with blood, Ethan. I simply used it better." The revelation changed everything. Ethan attacked with terrifying fury, but Lucien escaped after setting the church ablaze. Adrian stayed behind to help Ethan and Elena escape. Smoke filled the collapsing building. As flaming beams crashed around them, Adrian finally confessed. Lucien had threatened Adrian's younger sister. For months Adrian secretly fed information to Lucien to keep her alive. "I never wanted this," Adrian said desperately. Ethan looked at his oldest friend. Pain filled his eyes. "But not hatred." "Then help us end it." Together they escaped into the forest while the church burned behind them. The fire lit the mountains like a funeral. By dawn, the world believed Ethan Corleone died in the flames. Lucien publicly celebrated the news. But hidden far beyond the mountains, Ethan finally uncovered the full truth. Elena possessed documents proving several powerful leaders secretly profited from wars Ethan once fought. Lucien intended to sell those documents and eliminate everyone connected to the old conspiracy, including Ethan. The evidence could destroy governments. But releasing it openly would also spark chaos and violence. Ethan faced an impossible choice. Expose everything and watch innocent lives suffer. Or destroy the evidence and let powerful criminals remain free. The burden nearly broke him. Meanwhile, Lucien kidnapped Adrian's sister and demanded Ethan surrender himself alone. Elena begged Ethan not to go. "You know it's a trap." "I know. You'll die. Maybe that's the price for everything I failed to stop." Elena grabbed his hand. "No. You don't get to disappear every time life becomes painful." Ethan stared at her quietly. Then he finally confessed the truth he buried for years. "The night of the harbor fire, I was supposed to meet you. I knew something felt wrong. But instead of choosing you, I chose a business deal because I thought power mattered more." His voice cracked slightly. "And when the explosion happened, I realized too late that I traded the only good thing in my life for men who never cared whether I lived or died." Elena's eyes filled with tears. For years she waited to hear those words. Not excuses. Not pride. Truth. She stepped closer and touched the scar beneath his eye. "You are not the man you used to be." Ethan shook his head. "I don't know who I am anymore." "Yes," Elena whispered. "You do." They kissed for the first time in years while rain fell softly outside the cabin. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because both of them finally stopped running from what they felt. The following night Ethan walked alone toward the abandoned fortress where Lucien waited. Snow covered the cliffs surrounding the old structure. Floodlights cut through darkness while armed guards patrolled the walls. Lucien greeted Ethan with applause. The legend returns. Ethan lowered his hood calmly. Release the girl. Lucien smiled. You still don't understand. This was never about the girl. He stepped closer. It was about becoming greater than you. Years ago Lucien admired Ethan. Then admiration became jealousy. Lucien spent years proving fear could control entire nations. But no matter how powerful he became, people still whispered Ethan's name with more respect. And Lucien hated him for it. The final confrontation exploded into chaos. Adrian secretly disabled the fortress security systems. Elena transmitted copies of the evidence to trusted journalists and humanitarian organizations rather than corrupt officials. Workers and guards inside the fortress turned against Lucien after learning he planned to eliminate everyone connected to the conspiracy. Suddenly Lucien's empire began collapsing from within. But Lucien refused to surrender. He challenged Ethan to a final duel inside the fortress courtyard while snowstorm winds screamed around them. The fight felt less like combat and more like years of pain colliding. Lucien attacked with fury. Ethan fought with control. Their blades sparked violently beneath frozen lights. Every movement carried history. Betrayal. Regret. Loss. At one point Lucien gained the advantage and held a blade against Ethan's throat. You were feared because people believed you had no weakness, Lucien hissed. Ethan looked toward Elena standing nearby. For the first time in his life, he understood something important. Love was never weakness. The fear of losing love was. And he was done living in fear. Ethan disarmed Lucien with one final movement that shattered Lucien's sword across the courtyard. Lucien fell to his knees in disbelief. Everyone expected Ethan to kill him. Years ago he would have. Instead Ethan stepped back. No more death. Lucien stared at him. You think mercy makes you strong? Ethan answered quietly. No. It makes me different from you. Moments later authorities and international investigators stormed the fortress after receiving Elena's evidence. Lucien was arrested while the remaining members of the conspiracy fled or surrendered. As dawn finally rose over the mountains, Ethan stood beside Elena watching sunlight break through clouds. For the first time in decades, he felt peace. Months later, Ravello looked completely different. The underground arena had closed permanently. The mansion overlooking the cliffs no longer felt empty. Children laughed through the hallways. Elena transformed part of the estate into a rehabilitation center for young survivors of violence and war. And Ethan, the feared Grandmaster, disappeared from public life. Rumors spread constantly. Some claimed he retired to the mountains. Others believed he died. The truth was far simpler. He finally chose a life worth protecting. One evening Ethan stood beside the ocean while Adrian prepared fishing equipment nearby. You know, Adrian said, people still tell stories about you. Ethan smiled faintly. That's unfortunate. Elena walked outside carrying warm tea. The sunset painted gold across the water. For several seconds nobody spoke. Peace itself felt unfamiliar. Then Elena slipped her hand into Ethan's. You still think love is dangerous? She asked softly. Ethan looked at her. Then toward the children playing safely beyond the garden. Yes, he admitted. Elena raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound very romantic. Ethan smiled for real this time. It's dangerous because it gives people something worth becoming better for. Elena leaned against him while ocean wind moved gently through the cliffs. The man once feared across nations no longer needed power to define him. He had faced betrayal. He had survived regret. He had learned that strength without compassion only creates loneliness. And in the end, the forbidden weakness everyone feared inside Ethan Corleone became the very thing that saved him. Love. Real love. Not the kind built on fear, but the kind strong enough to heal even the most broken soul. And as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Ethan finally understood something his brother tried to teach him years ago. The strongest men are not the ones who destroy enemies. They are the ones who protect peace after surviving war. Listen to the last comment again. The strongest men are not the ones who destroy enemies. They are the ones who protect peace after surviving war. If you find this story inspiring, please subscribe for more and do well to comment where you are watching from.